Now, there's no need to adjust your TV set. You're not watching Baywatch, you are still watching Racing.com, and you're watching this edition of They Once Raced here. I'm Edward Sadler, pleasure to be joined by Chris Ganly. And Chris, as Australians, we love a day at the beach, we love a day at the races. Well, why not combine them?
Exactly, a day at the beach, a day at the races, Ed. So they did. That's exactly what they did. So we're standing here, we're on what's known as Raff Beach. Just behind us is Ocean Grove proper beach, and we're looking down towards Barwon Heads, and this is where they raced. They raced here for a number of years, final meeting 2001, so not all that long ago. But you talk to people, people don't know they raced here, right? Because it is a little unusual to race on the beach. And so we've made our way down to what was sometimes the start and was sometimes the finish, believe it or not. They reversed the direction of running. So in the early years, this was the finishing line down where we're standing. They'd start back up there at Ocean Grove. In the last year, they reversed it. They made this the start, they put the finish down in front of the surf club. Probably made more sense. You know, you can get a lot more people out in front of it. Photographs of it show there were a lot of people here, a lot of people on the beach all the way along, and particularly at the finishing line. What a great spot to come to the races. You've got to wonder about safety a little bit though, Ed. You know, you've got these big animals and many of them running down the beach. I've seen photos that show Hessian as the fencing, probably not as secure as we see on most race courses these days. So I'm also told to start the race, they didn't bring the gates down here. They had a star picket with a piece of elastic.
And the other thing to point out with racing here, it wasn't just a race meeting as well too. It was known as the Ocean Grove Cup Carnival. It was a real event over that weekend in February.
It was, and you know, it was a great event for the community. They'd hold things like esky races, and they had fashions on the beach and all those sorts of things. So it was a very much a community event. They certainly, you know, drew in some people and drew in some activity and some attention for Ocean Grove and for the Barwon Heads area on that weekend.
So the Commandina Cup, as was known, the Ocean Grove races, without wanting to be self-indulgent here, Chris, does live in Sadler family folklore. There's documentary evidence that I was here as a young fella, one of the only tracks in this series that I did get to for the races. My sister Kate rode here in 1995, and my older sister Alison as well rode here in 1997. Won the big race here too, and the reason it lives in Sadler family folklore was because it was on a horse called Mac. Macca wasn't what he raced as though. He raced prior to that as Jolly Old Mac. He might have won an Australian Guineas.
Jolly Old Mac a half in front, answering the whip from Gouchy, and Jolly Old Mac's won it.
I reckon there might have been some family money on the horse that day too, Chris.
I suspect so, Ed. I suspect so, you know, and that's part of what makes racing great, isn't it? It's those stories, you know, and having a family connection to here. So that's part of what makes racing so much fun, you know, the stories and the personal connections into these things. At the last meeting, not only did Racing.com's own Adam Oslansky call it, but Robert Dippy Domenico was the master of ceremonies.
I remember as a young race caller, it was a great opportunity to call in front of such a big crowd. There were thousands of people there lining the beach line and in the dunes as well. And to be part of such a great event, calling on the beach in that sort of environment is something that's special.
We're getting a closer look at the track here at Ocean Grove because betting was big here, Chris. And I reckon if you were trying to find a winner here, you'd want to be backing the horse that's drawn on the firmer side of the track closer to the water.
I would think so. You know, we'd usually call that on the rail, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
But I think it's on the water is probably where you want to be. I think it's definitely a bit firmer down here and probably getting softer as we went up. But, you know, as the tide came in, it'd get a bit tricky as well, I would imagine. So, you know, one of the problems here, Ed, was as the tide came in. And I think we may have heard something from that from one of our colleagues.
Absolutely. So Matt Hill's called big races all around the world, all around Australia. He also called here and has got some vivid memories of what it was like.
Well, they're fond memories, actually. It was a great atmosphere, long beach there at Ocean Grove. So the races were about 1,000 metres to 1,200 metres. So it was a bit of a test for a race caller. They were a long way away. And it's the only race I've ever come across that was brought forward 40 minutes, and the reason being the tide was coming in. Basically, my broadcast box had been dismantled by the time the tide had come in. So unique, extremely unique. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say 8,000 to 10,000 were there. I loved it. I thought it was such a great novelty, and the people loved it.
So we've made our way down to beautiful location overlooking the beach, and Chris, this is essentially where the finish line was when they finished racing here at Ocean Grove.
That's exactly right, Ed. So it wasn't always the finish. It was only the finish line for that last race in 2001. Earlier than that, they finished down the other end where we've been. But this is probably a much better spot for a finish, right? You've got the surf club, you had the restaurant here, you had a little bit of infrastructure, and you know, I've seen photographs of those last days, and you know, there must have been 5,000-10,000 people here. A lot of people here. A lot of excitement. You know, a lot of people turning up for a day at the beach, a day at the races.
And only in the recent past, really, 2001 is when it finished. Why did it finish?
They can only take it so far, and so there are stories going around about why it ended. I think there's a more realistic reason why it ended, and that was that in May 2001, the government changed the legislation. And they changed the legislation to change the definition of a mixed sports meeting, as this was defined, and it required that mixed sports meetings needed to be held on a racecourse. To hold a meeting on a racecourse, you needed a licence. They weren't going to get a licence for the Ocean Grove Beach, and that brought an end to the racing in 2001.
That's it for this edition of They Once Raced Here. Chris, as always, thanks for your insight.
My pleasure, Ed. It's always great to come out with you on the road, and we'll do a little bit more of that soon. I'd suggest we won't be going to the beach again, so if you need a swim, this is the spot. The next one, I think we might just head down the road a little bit to Queenscliff, take you to a little place called Suma Park. Interesting stuff to see there.
So I think a park suits my figure a little bit better, otherwise I'll need to pull out the rash vest for getting in the water here at Ocean Grove. But that's it, thanks for your company. Continue to watch us on Racing.com as we take you far and wide to all sorts of unique locations they once raced at.